Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, aka PD Beats.
PD Beats here from Popternative is speaking to Stephen Moyer about Confession, which is coming out January 25th. Welcome back to the show, man. It's so good to see you.
It's very good to see you again. We spoke last year with the lovely Casper.
Yeah, absolutely. He mesmerized us with his Starship pinball machine.
That's
He gave us a tour.
He gave us a tour of his fun Batcave.
Absolutely. But it's fun. We're talking about Confession. There's so much going on in this movie. Is it safe to say that projects like this are the ones that get you the most excited, where you know there's just going to be a lot of action and thriller, and right out of the gate, you know, there's so much happening in the film?
My friend Dave Beaton came to me with the idea during quarantine, during lockdown, first lockdown, like back in March 2020. And I was developing something. I was working on a bunch of different projects. And I knew that this was going to be like a sort of 3-week jump in, shoot it, jump out again. And in fact, I ended up doing like 6 movies during quarantine, just like that. Because I was developing something else that was going to be a long-term thing.
Yeah.
And that pushed for a couple of reasons, which, you know, are exciting reasons, actually, like actor-wise. Yeah. But so it meant that I could go and do these little thrillers, these little projects that were just so much fun. And the movie takes place in real time. Mm-hmm. It's the course of like 90 minutes. And from the moment that my character knocks on the door of this church till the end of the movie, we're with him and what he's going through. And Crazy. it's basically me and the great Colin Meaney together. And when Dave and I first started talking about it, he was the top person on our list. So we were very, very excited to get him.
Is it one of those things too where, like you said, I find that very interesting because you worked on a lot of projects during quarantine and everything. Is it one of those things where you're getting used to now the fact that you work on all these projects and you book another one and you're going over things, and then it's kind of like here and there they kind of drop and get disseminated into the world, and like sometimes you don't know when it's going to happen? Like, are you getting used to that landscape a little bit? Because I feel like that's something that everyone has to get used to now. You don't know when things come out sometimes.
No. I've been planning something for the last 18 months, and we thought we were going like July. Yeah. The July that just passed, and we're now possibly not going until like late summer and even maybe 2023. Yeah. And like I've got another project that looks like it's now not going to happen, that was greenlit and was happening, that I've been part of since 2016. Mm-hmm. So it's just an odd landscape. It literally, it's such a movable feast right now. Yeah. And, you know, I still got some things bubbling away that were exciting. But when something like this comes up, which is like really beautifully written, great cast, 3 weeks with friends, ultimately, you know, me and Colin, this was shot during the first lockdown. And me and Colin were on an abandoned golf, because nothing was open. Yeah. We were on an abandoned golf course, living in 2 little wooden cottages next to each other, taking each other food on a daily basis, learning all these lines, you know. So it was an amazing experience. And I think it's a really cracking little movie, actually.
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, because obviously, you know, whenever you do press, you know, you have that kind of main project that you're focusing on. We're talking about Confession. Last time you were on, we talked about G-Lock. Yeah. But knowing, because like, you know, you've done a lot of amazing things that don't really have a shelf life, that are some amazing movies and shows that are kind of always around and very important to a lot of people's lives. Is it exciting for you and interesting for you when you do all these interviews too sometimes? Because you never know what, like they're going to ask you about your project, but you might not know other projects that they might ask you about, because there's so many kind of cool things. It's pretty cool to think about a little bit, right?
It is, yeah. And I mean, I think I shot 6 movies during this period of time. Yep. And possibly 7. I say possibly 7 because I think Yeah, I think it's 7th. Anyway, the 7th, somebody got COVID and we had to stop shooting.
Yeah.
So we were halfway through it, and we might be going back to that soon.
That's happened a lot. That's a tale that's happened a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and there's other things I'm waiting on right now, which a couple of really exciting projects, which would be awesome. But it is nice. It's like, I shot another thing during quarantine where I was able to get a bunch of friends who I've worked with before to come and work on that, who weren't working because of the situation. I was getting people that ordinarily wouldn't be available, that were just like, come and give us a day, come and give us 2 days, and they would come in just to literally, because we hadn't seen each other in 18 months, So we were getting together to work, just to really sort of gossip.
It's so interesting as well. When did you, I'm just curious for you, when you worked on all these projects, I mean, what drives you or interests you the most about projects like Confession or G-Lock, these projects that, might not have as big as a budget as other projects you've worked on, but just have so much kind of going on, meat and potato wise, in the script? Can you just tell me about that a little bit? I'm really curious about that, actually.
It's a good question. Pete. I often, and you'll have heard people talk about this before, but often, it's an interesting situation because I want to sound ungrateful, but often the things that one gets the most money for aren't necessarily the things that sort of fuel your desire.
Yeah.
And the little ones like this that don't pay at all are the ones that kind of fill you up creatively. And so I'm always looking out for young filmmakers, scripts that are a little bit different, a little bit odd, a little bit, that are tiny. Like, we shot this thing in 12 days, which was extraordinary, and it's just such a kind of like mental buzz, because once you're in it, it's like a train, the train's left the station and you've got to go.
Yeah.
One of the blessings of quarantine is that I went straight from shooting something in Bulgaria to doing this. And I had 10 days quarantine. I wasn't allowed to, I arrived in the country. I wasn't allowed to go in or out anywhere. But that was time that I could just sit and prep.
Yeah.
Learn the lines, just like learning a play. Learn the lines, do research. I did a whole bunch of research into this character I was playing in Confession that I wouldn't have had time to do otherwise. I went straight on to do another movie straight from this in Montana with Alicia Silverstone and Drew Van Acker, where again, I got like 6 days by myself in a motel room because of quarantine. I couldn't go out, where I literally just I transplanted onto that gig and just went completely into that world, that research, learning those lines. So honestly, in terms of like creatively, acting wise, it's been a lot of fun being able to just isolate in that way and do the work that, not having to worry about bills or the kids or anything like that. You're just in creative space. And that is something that I don't think anybody sort of thought we were going to be able to get during quarantine, but actually was one of the big bonuses.
Yeah, absolutely. And another question too, the other projects you have worked on, like the big scale projects that you've kind of talked about a little bit, like, True Blood and like The Gifted. I'm interested in the fact that like comic book culture, geek culture, like nerd culture, and I feel like you could throw in True Blood in there because of supernatural, vampires and everything. When I was younger growing up, I would get like made fun of for wearing like Spider-Man shirts and everything. Now, you're the coolest kid in school. When did you notice, as kind of a storyteller, Stephen, that kind of geek culture, nerd culture, a lot of those projects that you've worked on have become like the coolest thing? And it's like cool to be a geek. It's cool to be into that stuff. When did you kind of notice that?
It's a really good question. I think that, look, I didn't grow up like that. Spider-Man, the Spider-Man being the exception. I was obsessed with Spider-Man.
I feel like we all are. That's the character, man. Like I love.
I know. and the first time I saw that Tobey Maguire movie, the first time I saw it, I was in the theater, and I can't even remember how long ago that was, but I was in the theater by myself. I was shooting somewhere, and when he flies through the air, and and he's doing his webbing and he's flying through the air like that. I literally had this visceral return to reading those comic books.
Yeah, it brings you right back. Absolutely.
I just was right back there.
Yep.
And but I've said this multiple times on many podcasts and shows. It was not sci-fi and the Marvel world and DC and stuff. It wasn't my go-to area.
No.
I love fiction and I love modern fiction. I love the real world drama. I've been very transparent about that. But so when True Blood came along, I wasn't particularly a vampire fan. I wasn't particularly a fan of that genre or that world, or had it never even necessarily seen Buffy.
Yeah.
So for me, I went down the research rabbit hole and saw that what writers and creators were doing within these frameworks was using Battlestar Galactica or Bon Temps, Louisiana as a framework to tell human stories.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, we all know that what science fiction is doing is telling human stories, even though it might be completely out of this world.
Yeah.
It's talking about us.
Yep.
And so I think a lot of my friends who were kind of, geeks in that way were all just interested in finding out who they were. So what it's given is a possibility for people people who felt other or different to be seen.
Yeah.
And so I have great respect for it.
Yeah.
Because it's letting people get seen, which is amazing.
It's so great. And I'm really I want to thank you for coming back on the show, man. It was great catching up with you and chatting with you. So the film Confession is going to be available tomorrow, the 25th of January.
VOD, across the board, and then in England on the 31st, we
absolutely. No, that's great. Well, this has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for previous episodes. Until next time, this is Stephen Moyer, who you're going to be able to catch soon in Confession, and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.